The burlap sack weighed almost nothing in Helena Owens' calloused hand as she stood at the edge of Weaverville, California, watching the September sun bleed red across the Sierra Nevada peaks in 1878. And she wondered if a woman could truly disappear into nothing when she carried everything she owned in something so small. The dust from the main street still clung to her worn brown boots, the same boots that had carried her through 3 years of serving whiskey and dodging wandering hands at the Golden Nugget Saloon. And now they would carry her somewhere else, anywhere else, because staying meant watching Daniel marry the banker's daughter next week while pretending her heart had not shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. She had not planned to leave today. The decision had crystallized only hours ago when she had seen the wedding announcement posted outside the general store. Daniel's name linked with Priscilla Hartford in elegant script that seemed to mock every whispered promise he had made to her in the darkness behind the saloon. Helena had returned to her rented room above the Chinese laundry, packed her 2 dresses, her mother's silver hairbrush, a daguerreotype of her parents who died when she was 16, and the small leather journal where she kept her thoughts, and decided that was enough. Everything else in this town belonged to memories she needed to outrun. You do not have to go alone. The voice came from behind her, deep and quiet like distant thunder, and Helena turned to find Quentin Vance standing there with his horse's reins in one hand and something unreadable in his gray eyes. She knew him by sight. Everyone in Weaverville did. He worked cattle on the Brennan Ranch north of town, came into the saloon maybe once a month for a single whiskey that he nursed for an hour, while watching the room with the careful attention of a man who had learned not to trust crowds. He was tall, built like someone who had spent years doing hard work under an unforgiving sun, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains surrounding them. "I am not your concern," Helena said, turning back toward the road that would take her west toward the coast, toward San Francisco where she could lose herself in the crowds and start over. "Maybe not," Quentin agreed, and she heard his boots crunch in the gravel as he moved closer. "But I have been watching you for 2 years, Helena Owens, and I know when someone is running from pain with no plan and no protection. The road to the coast is dangerous for a woman alone." She faced him again, anger flaring hot in her chest. "You have been watching me." "Not like that," he said quickly, and she saw color rise in his tanned cheeks. "I mean, I have noticed you. The way you handle the drunks at the saloon without losing your temper, the way you always save half your dinner to give to the stray dogs. The way your whole face changes when you smile, which is not often enough." He stopped, seeming to realize he had revealed more than he intended. "I am riding to Sacramento. It is on your way. I could make sure you get there safely." Helena studied him, trying to find the angle, the hidden price. Men did not offer help without expecting something in return. That was a lesson she had learned repeatedly and painfully. "Why would you do that?" "Because I know what it is like to leave everything behind," Quentin said simply. "And because I could not live with myself if I read in some newspaper that you had been robbed or worse on a road I could have protected you on." He paused, then added with devastating honesty, "And because I have wanted to talk to you for 2 years but never had the courage." The confession hung in the cooling evening air between them. Helena's grip tightened on her sack. Every instinct told her to refuse, to walk away, to never trust a man again. But something in Quentin's eyes stopped her. There was no calculation there, no predatory gleam. Just a quiet sincerity that made her chest ache with something she could not quite name. "I cannot pay you," she said finally. "I am not asking for payment. I will not be in debt to you. There is no debt." Helena looked down the empty road, then back at Quentin and his patient horse. The sun had nearly set now, painting everything in shades of purple and gold. She thought about the long night ahead, walking alone in the darkness with only her grief for company. She thought about bandits and wild animals and the 100 dangers that waited for solitary travelers. And she thought about the soft desperation in Quentin's voice when he said he had wanted to talk to her for 2 years. "I leave now," she said. "Not tomorrow. Now, I am ready. And you will not expect anything from me. No favors, no gratitude beyond basic courtesy." "Agreed." She searched his face one more time, looking for the lie, but found only steady patience. "Fine. But I am keeping my knife where I can reach it." Something that might have been hurt flickered across Quentin's features, but he nodded. "I would expect nothing less." He helped her mount behind him on his sturdy roan gelding, and Helena tried not to notice how solid he felt when she had to hold his waist to keep her balance. Her sack pressed against her back. Everything she owned in the world reduced to a weight so small, it was almost laughable. As they rode out of Weaverville, she did not look back at the town where she had spent 3 years of her life. Looking back only made leaving harder, and she had already cried all the tears she intended to shed over Daniel and his broken promises. They rode in silence for the first hour, the horses' hoofbeats steady on the packed dirt road. The stars emerged one by one overhead, so bright and numerous they looked like someone had scattered diamonds across black velvet. Helena had forgotten how beautiful the night could be away from the oil lamps and noise of town. The air smelled clean, like pine and earth and possibility. "You can sleep if you need to," Quentin said finally. "I will make sure you do not fall." "I am not tired," Helena lied, though exhaustion pulled at her bones. She had not slept properly in days, not since she had realized Daniel was going to marry someone else without even having the courage to tell her to her face. "Will you tell me why you are leaving?" Quentin asked. "Or is that too personal a question?" Helena considered refusing, but something about the anonymity of the darkness made honesty easier. "There was a man. I thought he loved me. I was wrong." "Daniel Harper," Quentin said, and it was not a question. She stiffened against his back. "How did you know?" "Because I have eyes," Quentin said, and there was no judgment in his voice, only sadness. "I saw how you looked at him. And I saw how he took advantage of that while keeping you hidden like a secret he was ashamed of." The words hit too close to the truth. Helena blinked back tears that she had promised herself she would not shed. "I was a fool." "You were someone who loved," Quentin corrected. "That is not foolish. What he did with that love, that is on him, not you." They rode in silence for another mile before Helena found the courage to ask, "Why did you never speak to me before? In 2 years you could have said something." Quentin's shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. "Because I am not good with words. Because I figured a woman like you would have no interest in a simple ranch hand. Because every time I thought about approaching you, I convinced myself I would just make a fool of myself." He paused. "I guess I am making a fool of myself now anyway." "You are not," Helena said quietly, and she felt him relax slightly at her words. "Can I tell you what I noticed about you?" Quentin asked. "In those 2 years, I suppose I cannot stop you. I noticed that you never cheated anyone at the card tables, even when you could have. I noticed that you stood up for Mary Chen when those miners were harassing her, even though you could have been hurt. I noticed that you read books during your breaks, real books with thick spines and small print. I noticed that you have a scar on your left hand shaped like a crescent moon." His voice dropped lower. "And I noticed that Daniel Harper never looked at you the way a man should look at a woman he loves." Helena's throat tightened. "And how should a man look at a woman he loves?" "Like she is the answer to every question he has ever asked," Quentin said. "Like the sun only rises because she is in the world. Like he would tear down mountains with his bare hands if it meant keeping her safe." The rawness in his voice made Helena's heart pound. That is quite poetic for a man who claims he is not good with words. I have had 2 years to practice what I would say if I ever got the chance, Quentin admitted. They stopped to rest the horse near a creek around midnight. Quentin helped Helena down, his hands steady on her waist, and she found herself noticing details about him that she had never paid attention to before. The way his hair fell across his forehead when he bent to check the horse's hooves. The surprising gentleness in his calloused hands as he unsaddled the gelding. The way he moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in the wilderness. "We should sleep for a few hours," Quentin said, spreading out a bedroll near a cluster of pine trees. "The horse needs rest even if we do not." Helena set her sack down and wrapped her arms around herself. The September night had turned cold at this elevation, and her thin shawl did little to block the wind. She saw Quentin notice her shivering and start to remove his jacket, but she held up a hand. "I do not need charity." "It is not charity," Quentin said, but he stopped. "Can I at least build a fire?" She nodded, too cold to refuse that much. While he gathered wood and coaxed flames to life, Helena sat on a fallen log and studied him. In the firelight, his face looked younger, less guarded. She tried to remember if she had ever really looked at him before, or if he had always been just part of the background scenery of her life in Weaverville. "Why are you really going to Sacramento?" she asked, when he sat down across the fire from her. Quentin prodded the flames with a stick. "Looking for work. The Brennan Ranch is selling, and the new owner is bringing his own crew. I have some money saved. I thought I might try to buy some land of my own, start small with a few head of cattle." He looked up at her. "What will you do in San Francisco?" "I do not know," Helena admitted. "Find work, disappear, start over where nobody knows me. You could stay in Sacramento," Quentin said carefully. "It is big enough to disappear in, but not so big you would get lost." "Why would I stay in Sacramento?" He met her eyes across the fire. "Because I will be there. And maybe, if you wanted, we could get to know each other properly. No expectations, no pressure. Just 2 people who are both starting over, doing it together instead of alone." Helena wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. She had known this man for exactly 4 hours of actual conversation. But something in his earnest gray eyes made her pause. "You do not know anything about me. I could be a terrible person." "You are not," Quentin said with absolute certainty. "How do you know?" "Because I have been watching," he said again. "And because terrible people do not feed stray dogs or cry in the alley behind the saloon when they think nobody can see them." Helena's cheeks burned. "You saw that." "I wanted to comfort you every time," Quentin said softly, "but I did not think I had the right." She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They sat in silence, listening to the fire crack and pop, until exhaustion finally pulled at Helena too strongly to resist. Quentin gave her the bedroll and insisted he would sleep sitting against a tree, and she was too tired to argue. She lay down fully clothed with her knife tucked under the makeshift pillow, and tried not to think about how her life had changed so completely in just one day. She woke once in the deep hours before dawn, disoriented and cold, and found that someone had draped a heavy jacket over her. Across the dying fire, Quentin sat with his back against a pine tree, arms crossed over his chest, clearly shivering but awake and watchful. Helena pulled the jacket tighter around herself and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Trust, maybe. Or the first fragile shoots of something that might someday become more. They rode on at first light, stopping only briefly to water the horse and eat the provisions Quentin had brought. The landscape changed as they descended from the mountains, the pine forests giving way to rolling hills covered in golden grass. Helena found herself relaxing against Quentin's back, her arms around his waist feeling less strange and more natural with each passing mile. "Tell me about your family," she said as they rode through the morning. Quentin was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "My parents had a farm in Missouri. My father died when I was 12, kicked by a horse. My mother tried to keep the farm going, but the debt was too much. She died of pneumonia the winter I turned 15. I buried her next to my father and started drifting west, working whatever jobs I could find." "I am sorry," Helena said, meaning it. "It was a long time ago," Quentin said, but she heard the old pain in his voice. "What about you?" "My parents ran a boarding house in Sacramento," Helena told him. "They died in a fire when I was 16. I was out buying supplies when it happened. By the time I got back, the whole building was gone and they were dead. I had no other family, no money, nothing. I ended up in Weaverville because I heard the gold rush meant work, and I needed work to survive." "That is how you ended up at the saloon." "It was the only place that would hire me," Helena said. "I told myself it was temporary, that I would save money and do something better. But then years passed and I was still there, and Daniel seemed like maybe a way out." She laughed bitterly. "I should have known better. The banker's daughter can give him things I never could." "Any man who chooses money over you is a fool," Quentin said with such conviction that Helena felt her eyes sting. They reached a small trading post around noon, and Quentin insisted on buying Helena a proper coat and a hat to shield her from the sun. She protested, but he said simply, "Let me do this, please." There was such naked hope in his face that she relented, and told herself the warmth that spread through her chest had nothing to do with the way he smiled when she tried on the coat. As they rode on through the afternoon, Helena found herself asking Quentin questions about his life, his work, his dreams. He talked about cattle ranching with the passion of someone describing a beloved art form, explaining the satisfaction of working with animals, the peace of open spaces, the pride of building something with your own hands. She told him about the books she loved to read, the stories that let her escape into other worlds and other lives. He admitted he could barely read beyond basic words, and she offered without thinking to teach him if he wanted to learn. "You would do that?" Quentin asked, and the wonder in his voice made her realize how few people had probably offered him kindness without expecting something in return. "Of course," Helena said. "Everyone should be able to read." They made camp that night near an abandoned line shack, which provided more shelter than the open ground. Quentin caught 2 rabbits and roasted them over the fire, and Helena had to admit they tasted better than anything she had eaten at the saloon. As they ate, he told her stories about life on the ranch, making her laugh with tales of stubborn cattle and ornery horses. She found herself studying the way firelight played across his features, the way his whole face transformed when he smiled. "Can I ask you something?" Quentin said as they finished eating. "You can ask," Helena allowed. "That night I saw you crying in the alley, the night about a month ago. What happened?" Helena looked down at her hands. "Daniel told me he was going to marry someone else. He said it was always going to end this way, that I should have known better than to think we could have a future together. He said I was fun, but not the kind of woman a man brings home to his mother." She forced herself to meet Quentin's eyes. "He made me feel like I was nothing." The muscles in Quentin's jaw clenched. "If I ever see Daniel Harper again, I am going to have a very hard time not hitting him." "Violence will not fix anything," Helena said, but she felt oddly touched by his anger on her behalf. "Maybe not," Quentin agreed, "but it would make me feel better." He reached across the space between them and very gently took her hand. "You are not nothing, Helena. You are brave and kind and smart, and any man who cannot see that is blind." His hand was warm and rough with calluses, and Helena did not pull away. You do not know me well enough to say that. I know enough, Quentin said, and I would like to know more if you will let me. Helena looked at their joined hands, at this man who had appeared out of nowhere and offered her exactly what she needed when she needed it most. Part of her wanted to run to protect herself from the possibility of more pain, but a larger part, the part that was tired of being afraid, wanted to stay. What if I am not ready for more? Then I will wait, Quentin said simply. I have waited 2 years. I can wait longer. They sat like that, hands clasped, until the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead. Helena tried to remember the last time someone had touched her with such careful gentleness, as if she were something precious instead of merely convenient. She could not. The next day they reached the outskirts of Sacramento, and Helena felt panic flutter in her chest. This was where she was supposed to continue on to San Francisco alone. This was where she was supposed to say goodbye to Quentin and disappear into anonymity. But the thought of not seeing him again felt like losing something she had only just found. There is a boarding house on K Street, Quentin said as they rode into the city. Run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is honest and charges fair rates. I can take you there if you want. Where will you be staying? Helena asked. There is a workers' hotel near the stockyards. Nothing fancy, but it is cheap and clean. Helena made a decision that surprised even herself. Take me to your hotel. If they have rooms available, I will stay there instead. Quentin twisted in the saddle to look at her, his gray eyes searching her face. Are you sure? Mrs. Patterson's place would be more proper. I am sure, Helena said, and realized she meant it. She had spent 3 years doing what was proper, what was expected, and where had it gotten her? Maybe it was time to do what she wanted instead. The hotel was indeed cheap and clean. A simple 3-story building with whitewashed walls and narrow windows. The proprietor, a gruff man with mutton chops, had one room left on the 2nd floor, right next to the room Quentin rented. Helena paid for a week with some of the money she had saved, and tried not to think too hard about what she was doing. Quentin helped her carry her sack upstairs, then stood awkwardly in the doorway of her room. I need to go look for work tomorrow. But I could show you around the city first if you want, help you get your bearings. I would like that, Helena said. He smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. I will knock on your door at 8. I will be ready. After he left, Helena sat on the narrow bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the past 2 days. She had left Weaverville running from heartbreak with no plan and no hope. And now here she was in Sacramento with a room of her own, and a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. It felt too good to be real, which made her suspicious. Life had taught her that good things came with hidden prices. But when Quentin knocked on her door the next morning with a smile and a bouquet of wildflowers he must have picked at dawn, Helena decided to let herself hope. Just for a little while, just to see what happened. Quentin showed her Sacramento with the enthusiasm of someone sharing his favorite secret. They walked along the riverfront, visited the market where vendors sold everything from fresh vegetables to intricate Chinese silks, explored the state capitol building with its impressive dome. He bought her lunch at a little restaurant that served surprisingly good beef stew, and they sat by the window watching people pass while talking about everything and nothing. I have a meeting tomorrow with a man who is selling land south of the city, Quentin told her over coffee. 20 acres with a creek running through it. If the price is right, I might have enough to buy it. That is wonderful, Helena said, and meant it. But she also felt a small pang because owning land meant Quentin would be putting down roots, staying in one place, building a life. And she still did not know where she fit in that picture or if she fit at all. As if reading her thoughts, Quentin reached across the table and took her hand. Come with me tomorrow, to see the land. I would value your opinion. My opinion? I do not know anything about ranching. But you know about building a life from nothing, Quentin said. You know about survival and hard work, and I want you to see it. I want you to be part of this. Helena felt her heart skip. Quentin, we barely know each other. You cannot make decisions about your future based on someone you met 3 days ago. I am not, he said steadily. I am making decisions based on someone I have been in love with for 2 years. The words hung between them, impossible and terrifying and wonderful. Helena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You do not love me. You love the idea of me. I love the way you bite your lip when you are thinking hard about something, Quentin said. I love that you cannot walk past someone who needs help without stopping. I love that you are brave enough to walk away from a life that was hurting you. I love your laugh, which I have only heard twice but want to hear every day for the rest of my life. He squeezed her hand. Tell me that is just an idea. Helena felt tears prick her eyes. I am not ready to love someone again. Daniel broke something in me. Then let me help you heal, Quentin said. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me be here and let yourself trust that maybe, eventually, you could feel something for me too. She should say no. She should protect herself. But when she looked into Quentin's honest gray eyes, Helena found herself nodding. I will come see the land tomorrow. The land was beautiful. 20 acres of rolling hills with ancient oak trees and a clear creek that sang over smooth stones. The man selling it was a widower moving back east to live with his daughter, and he had already built a small cabin and a sturdy barn. Quentin walked the property line with barely contained excitement, pointing out where he could expand the barn, where the best grazing would be, how the creek provided year-round water. Helena followed him, watching the way he came alive talking about his dreams, and felt something shift inside her chest. This was not Daniel with his pretty words and empty promises. This was a man who knew what he wanted and was willing to work for it. A man who saw a future and invited her into it without demanding she change herself to fit his vision. What do you think? Quentin asked, slightly breathless as they stood on a rise overlooking the whole property. I think it is perfect, Helena said honestly. I think you should buy it. Quentin corrected. I think we should buy it. Helena's breath caught. Quentin, I cannot let you do that. I have no money to contribute. I would just be taking advantage of you. You are not taking advantage, he said, turning to face her fully. Listen, I know this is fast. I know you need time, but I also know I do not want to build this life without you in it. So here is what I am proposing. Marry me. What? Helena took a step back. Marry me, Quentin repeated and held up his hand before she could protest. Not because I expect anything from you. Not because you owe me. But because if you are my wife, this land is legally yours too. You will have security, protection, a home, and I will have the honor of waking up every day and trying to earn your love. He stepped closer. If you never love me back, I will survive. But at least you will be safe and cared for, which is more than you had in Weaverville. Helena stared at him. That is insane. People do not get married after knowing each other for 4 days. People do all kinds of things, Quentin said, and nothing about my feelings for you is sane anyway. I have been in love with you since the first time I saw you laugh at something the bartender said. I have been in love with you through 2 years of watching from a distance. 4 days of actually knowing you has only made it worse. You cannot promise to be content with a marriage where I might never love you back, Helena said. That is not fair to you. Let me worry about what is fair to me, Quentin said. You worry about what is fair to you. And I am betting that security and partnership, and someone who will always be on your side, sounds pretty fair after what you have been through. Helena turned away, looking out over the land that could be hers, the future that Quentin was offering like a gift with no strings attached. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was foolish, that she should run before she got hurt again. But her heart, her battered, broken heart, whispered that maybe this was exactly what she needed. Not a passionate love that burned bright and fast like what she had felt for Daniel, but something steadier, something that could last. "What if I am a terrible wife?" she asked quietly. "Impossible," Quentin said. "What if I am cold and distant and never let you touch me?" "Then I will wait until you are ready, and I will keep my distance, and I will still consider myself the luckiest man alive because you are there." Helena turned back to him. "What if I do fall in love with you? What then?" Quentin smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Then I will die happy." She studied his face, this man who had come out of nowhere and offered her everything when she had nothing. She thought about trust, about faith, about the courage it took to let yourself hope, and she thought about how tired she was of being alone. "Ask me again," Helena said. "Properly this time." Quentin dropped to one knee right there on the hilltop, taking both her hands in his. "Helena Owens, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I promise to spend every day trying to deserve you. I promise to keep you safe and provide for you. I promise to be patient while you figure out how you feel about me. And I promise that whether you love me or not, I will love you enough for both of us." Tears streamed down Helena's face, but for the first time in weeks, they were not tears of pain. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Quentin stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her so carefully, like she was made of glass. Helena let herself lean into his strength, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. They were married 3 days later by a justice of the peace, with the hotel proprietor and his wife as witnesses. Helena wore her best dress, the blue one she had been saving for a special occasion that had never come in Weaverville. Quentin bought a new shirt and combed his hair back with water, and when he said his vows, his voice shook with emotion. The marriage certificate made it real. Helena Vance, it said in official black ink, a new name for a new life. She traced the letters with one finger and felt the strangest sensation, like a door closing on one part of her life while another door swung open to possibilities she had not dared imagine. Quentin used most of his savings to buy the land, and they moved into the cabin the following week. It was small, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was clean and sturdy and theirs. Helena stood in the main room that served as kitchen and living space and felt something fierce and protective bloom in her chest. This was her home. Not a rented room above a laundry, not a corner bed in a boarding house, but a real home. "I will sleep in the loft," Quentin said, carrying her sack inside. "You can have the bedroom." Helena looked at this man who was now legally her husband, who had promised to wait however long it took for her to be ready for more. "Thank you." He just nodded and went back outside to tend to his horse. The first weeks of marriage were strange and tentative. They moved around each other carefully, learning each other's rhythms. Quentin woke before dawn to do chores, and Helena would find coffee already made when she came downstairs. She cooked meals with the supplies he bought in town, trying to remember recipes her mother had taught her years ago. They ate together at the small table, talking about the day's work, the weather, plans for the property. Quentin never pushed for more than she was willing to give. He never tried to kiss her beyond the chaste peck on the cheek he had given her after their wedding. He never made demands or expectations. He just worked from dawn to dusk building their future and looked at her in the evenings like she was something miraculous. Helena told herself she should feel grateful, and she did. But she also felt confused because gratitude was not love, and she did not know if what she felt for Quentin would ever become love. She liked him. She respected him. She felt safe with him. But was that enough for a marriage? One evening about 3 weeks after their wedding, Helena was washing dishes when Quentin came in from checking on the 6 head of cattle he had bought. He had a cut on his arm from a fence wire, and without thinking, Helena grabbed a cloth and water and made him sit down so she could clean it. "It is just a scratch," Quentin protested, but he sat. Helena dabbed at the cut, frowning at the blood. "You need to be more careful." "Yes, madam," Quentin said, and there was amusement in his voice. She looked up and found him watching her with such warmth that her breath caught. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "Just thinking how nice this is, having someone worry about me." Helena finished bandaging his arm, but she did not move away. "Has no one ever worried about you before?" "Not since my mother died," Quentin admitted. "It has been just me for so long I forgot what it felt like to matter to someone." "You matter," Helena said, and realized she meant it. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Quentin had become important to her. Not in the desperate, consuming way she had needed Daniel, but in something quieter and more solid. He was the first person she thought about when she woke up. He was the reason she found herself smiling while doing mundane chores. He was the steady heartbeat at the center of her new life. "Helena," Quentin said quietly, and there was a question in his eyes. She did not let herself think too hard about it. She just leaned forward and kissed him. It was nothing like kissing Daniel. There was no urgency, no desperation. Instead, it was gentle and sweet, a question and an answer all at once. Quentin made a soft sound and brought one hand up to cup her cheek, his touch reverent. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I am not sure I am ready for more than that," Helena whispered. "That is more than enough," Quentin said and kissed her forehead. "That is everything." After that, things shifted between them. Helena started reaching for Quentin's hand when they walked the property together. She sat closer to him at dinner, their shoulders touching. She caught herself watching him work and appreciating the strength in his body, the capable way he handled every task. And slowly, so slowly she almost did not notice it happening, the walls around her heart began to crumble. Quentin courted her like they were not already married. He brought her wildflowers every few days. He learned to read using books she borrowed from the town library, his brow furrowed in concentration as he sounded out words. He listened when she talked about her parents, her grief, her fears. He told her stories about his childhood, the happy memories before his parents died. They talked late into the night about dreams and hopes and the life they were building together. 2 months after their wedding, Helena woke in the middle of the night and realized she was in love with her husband. The knowledge hit her like a thunderbolt, sudden and undeniable. She loved the way he hummed while doing chores. She loved his terrible jokes that he told with such earnestness. She loved the way he always asked her opinion about decisions. She loved his patience, his kindness, his unshakable steadiness. She climbed down from the bedroom and up to the loft where Quentin slept. He woke immediately when she said his name, sitting up with alarm. "What is wrong? Are you all right?" "I love you," Helena said. Quentin blinked, sure he had misheard. "What?" "I love you," she repeated and started to cry. "I am in love with you, and it terrifies me because what if you break my heart? What if I am not enough? What if this does not last?" Quentin pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I will not break your heart. You are more than enough, and this will last because I will never stop working to deserve you." He pulled back to look at her face in the moonlight streaming through the loft window. "Say it again." "I love you, Quentin Vance," Helena said and kissed him. This kiss was different from their first. This one held promise and passion and the future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I have waited 2 years to hear you say that," he whispered. "It was worth every second." That night, Helena did not return to her bedroom, and Quentin did not let her go. They lay tangled together in the narrow loft bed, talking and kissing and making plans. and when dawn broke over the Sacramento Valley, Helena knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The seasons turned, winter giving way to spring and then summer. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Quentin bought more cattle, built a new corral, expanded the cabin with 2 additional rooms. Helena planted a vegetable garden that flourished in the California sun. She sold eggs and vegetables at the market in town, adding her own income to their household. They worked side by side, building something real and lasting. In the evenings, they sat on the porch Quentin had built, watching the sun set over their land, and Helena marveled at how completely her life had changed. A year ago, she had been serving drinks to minors and crying over a man who did not deserve her tears. Now she was a wife, a partner, a woman building a future with her own hands. "You ever regret it?" Quentin asked one evening as they watched fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. "Marrying me so quickly," Helena took his hand, threading their fingers together. "Not for a single second. You saved me, Quentin, not just from the road or from being alone. You saved me from believing I was not worthy of real love." "You were always worthy," Quentin said. "I just got lucky enough to be the one to show you." They kissed as the stars came out, and Helena thought about that day in Weaverville when she had stood at the edge of town with everything fitting in one sack, ready to disappear into nothing. She thought about how Quentin had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to say. She thought about trust and faith and the courage it took to let yourself hope. A year and a half after their wedding, Helena told Quentin she was pregnant. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then set her down carefully like she had suddenly become made of spun glass. She smacked his arm and told him she was not fragile, and he said he knew, but he was going to worry anyway, because that was his right as a father. Their son was born in the spring of 1880, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Thomas after Quentin's father, and Helena had never seen such wonder on her husband's face as when he held his son for the first time. Quentin cried, big tears rolling down his cheeks, and whispered promises to this tiny human about the life they would give him. Thomas was followed by a daughter 2 years later, Sarah Rose, who had her mother's determination and her father's gentle spirit. And then another son 3 years after that, little William, who came into the world laughing and never stopped. The ranch prospered as the years passed. Quentin proved to have a gift for breeding cattle, and their herd became known throughout the region for quality. Helena managed the finances with a sharp eye and shrewd negotiating skills that sometimes surprised even her. They hired help as they could afford it, and eventually built a proper ranch house with separate bedrooms for the children and a big kitchen where Helena taught Sarah to bake bread. Sometimes, usually late at night when the children were asleep, and she and Quentin sat on the porch of their beautiful home, Helena thought about Daniel Harper. She had heard through town gossip that he and his wife had moved to San Francisco, that his business ventures had failed, that he drank too much and gambled his wife's family money away. Helena felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a distant pity. He had taught her what love was not, which had allowed her to recognize the real thing when it finally appeared. "What are you thinking about?" Quentin asked, pulling her from her reverie. "About how everything turned out," Helena said, leaning against his shoulder. "About how scared I was that day I left Weaverville and how you saved me." "We saved each other," Quentin corrected, as he always did when she said things like that. "I was drifting before you, just existing, not really living. You gave me a reason to build something permanent. You made me believe I could have a family, a home, a future worth planning for." Helena turned to kiss him, this man who had loved her at her lowest and stood beside her as she became her best. "I am so glad you stopped me that day. I'm so glad you said I did not have to go alone. I would make that choice every day for the rest of my life, Quentin said. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Vance. They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their ranch, the cattle lowing in the distance, an owl hooting from the oak tree by the creek. Inside the house, their children slept safe and loved. Around them stretched land they had built into prosperity through hard work and partnership. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, the same stars that had watched over them that first night when Quentin had offered protection and Helena had taken a leap of faith. As the years continued to pass, the ranch grew into one of the most successful in the region. Thomas grew into a serious young man who loved the land as much as his father did. Sarah became a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch property for the children of their workers and neighboring families. William followed his mother's head for business and handled sales and negotiations with buyers from San Francisco and beyond. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quentin gave Helena a photograph he had commissioned. It showed the two of them standing in front of their ranch house, surrounded by their grown children and the 3 grandchildren who had arrived by then. Helena looked at it and saw everything they had built together, all the love and work and faith that had turned a desperate flight from heartbreak into the most beautiful life she could have imagined. You remember what I said when I proposed? Quentin asked, his hair now gray at the temples but his eyes still the same steady gray that had captured her heart. You said a lot of things, Helena teased. I said whether you loved me or not, I would love you enough for both of us, Quentin said. I am glad I was wrong about that. Helena kissed him, this man who had given her everything, who had proved that real love was patient and kind and steady as stone. You were not wrong. You did love me enough for both of us until I learned how to love you back. That is what made all the difference. They stood on their porch as the sun set over the ranch they had built from nothing, and Helena remembered the girl she had been, leaving Weaverville with everything fitting in one sack, certain she was walking toward nothing. She remembered the cowboy who had said she did not have to go alone, who had looked at her broken heart and offered his whole one in return. She remembered being terrified and taking the leap anyway. She remembered learning to trust again, to hope again, to love again. And she remembered that the best love stories were not the ones that started with fireworks, but the ones built one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of faith at a time. The love stories that lasted were the ones where someone saw you at your worst and decided you were worth the wait. Where 2 broken people decided to heal together instead of apart. Where a cowboy and a woman fleeing heartbreak chose each other and built something so strong it could withstand anything life threw at them. As darkness fell and the stars emerged overhead, Quentin took Helena's hand and led her inside their home, where the fire burned warm and their family waited. And Helena knew, with the certainty that comes from a lifetime of proof, that saying yes that day on the hilltop had been the best decision she had ever made. The sack that had once held everything she owned sat in the attic now, a relic from another life. These days, everything Helena owned could not fit in 100 sacks. But more than that, everything she valued could not be packed away at all. Love, family, partnership, home, these things had weight and substance but could not be carried. They could only be built, day by day, year by year, with patience and faith and the courage to trust. She had left Weaverville with nothing. She had arrived here with slightly more than nothing, accompanied by a cowboy with hope in his eyes and love in his heart. And together, they had turned that nothing into everything, proving that sometimes the best journeys were the ones you did not have to take alone, and the best love stories were the ones that started with someone simply saying, "You do not have to go alone." and meaning it with every fiber of their being.